James, honey, did something happen to you? After we got separated in that long hallway? Are you confusing me with someone else? You were always so forgetful. Remember that time in the hotel?
Maria?
You said you took everything, but you forgot that videotape we made. I wonder if it's still there.
How do you know about that? Aren't you Maria?
For me, the Silent Hill games have always been a series that other people talked about and one I was never able to join in the conversation on. And this wasn't because I had no interest in them or because I don't enjoy horror. That really couldn't be further from the truth. I don't know if you can tell this from the everything about my channel, but I love video games. I have since I was a little kid, and I also really love horror, psychological horror especially. So you might find it weird that, given those facts, I've literally never touched the Silent Hill games until now. Well, the reason for that is simple. I am, and always have been, poor. I've lived under the poverty line my entire adult life, and growing up, my family was only marginally higher than that, despite the best efforts of my parents to give us everything we needed. This meant the more expensive indulgences like video games were a rare treat, so my personal library was very small, and there have been a lot of games and entire series that I've never touched or barely gotten into, much to my own regret. That's the problem with having very little disposable income, which I'm sure many of you can relate to. I have, however, been endeavouring to redress the balance somewhat, now that I have my own desktop for the first time in my life, and not just one in a series of laptops of varying quality, which means that I can actually turn to services like Steam and utilise tools like emulators to play the games I never got the chance to as a kid. I really want to play the classics and the masterpieces, to finally experience the art my family's financial situation deprived me of. And to that end, and since I have my own YouTube channel now, I've decided to make a project of it. I'm going to finally play the games I've heard so much about and experience them for myself. And since it's October at time of writing and I'm in the spooky mood, I'm starting with Silent Hill. Also because it beat out Resident Evil on the Patreon poll. I was originally going to start with the first game, but I stumbled upon the rather fucking unfortunate situation that there just isn't a single ROM of the game that's compatible with my emulator, and I really didn't want to set up a second one for a single game, so I'm starting with the second, but I do plan to get around to the first game eventually, once I figure out how to get it to work. Before we begin, allow me to set your expectations. First point of order, this video will be broken up into two basic sections. The first is an overview of my playthrough of the game with more of a comedic lean, and the second will be my analysis of the story, themes and gameplay, etc. through a critical lens. So if you're just interested in the critical analysis of someone playing the game for the first time, feel free to jump to that part of the video. Second point of order, I am specifically playing an emulation of the original PS2 game. I am aware of the remake, I've heard people talk about it, I have not played it myself and do not intend to until I've at least finished the original 4 Silent Hill games and potentially F. Finally, while I've obviously had the twist of the game spoiled for me many times over, I went into this determined to judge the game on its own objective merits, just as I do with anything I review, okay? I will judge James on his sins as he commits them and not a second sooner, alright? Okay. That should be everything, so without further ado, let's get into Silent Hill 2. So the game starts in FMV mode with our mopey little protagonist, James Uxoricide Sunderland, examining his face in the bathroom mirror, wondering aloud if his wife could really be here. Well, I mean, not here, this is the men's room and it's gross. What I mean is, if she could really be in the town he's in, the town of Silent Hill like her letter said. But there'll be time to ponder that later because right now I'm busy embarrassing myself with these fucking tank controls. I wanted on record that I'm not going to be like marking points off for them or anything, but this is literally my first time playing a game with tank controls ever, so it takes me a long time to get used to them. Actually, that's a lie, I literally never got used to them in my entire playthrough. They were a bigger threat to me than any of the actual monsters, but I'm fully prepared to admit that's a me problem and not an actual issue with the game. Anyway, I eventually grind myself against a wall in the proper direction and leave the bathroom, where James steps out blinking into the fog and ponders the mystery of what the hell Mary meant by their special place. And also how the hell a woman who's been dead for 3 years managed to write him such a vague letter in the first place. I haven't the heart to tell him he's probably imagining the whole thing since dead people can't send letters. I mean, I know she's been dead for 3 days tops, but we're pretending otherwise, so shush. Anyway, since James has literally nothing better to do with his time, he runs off into the nearby forest to meander his way to the town proper, and I feel my butthole clench as the fog thickens and snarling sounds start following me down the path, which, being the exceptionally courageous horror game player that I am, I bravely run the hell away from it. The brave part is admitting I'm scared. And I flee right into a cutscene, which,
Excuse me,
I'm sorry. I
No,
was
it's
just...
okay. I didn't mean to scare you. I'm kind of lost.
You're just gonna have to forgive the audio fuzz, I blame the emulator. Also, wow, people were not lying about the stilted line delivery in this game. And, bye, I guess? James didn't even ask her name, what a rude boy he is. Well, it'd be too awkward to go back and ask her about it now. Better just stumble my way into town and down to the local save point. And then I just mosey around town trying to ignore the trails of blood until I find the spot that advances the plot. The plot being this weird little number here that the wiki helpfully informs me is called a lying figure. And aware as I am that these games are really big on symbolism and the monster designs, I believe this obviously represents the time James fell asleep on top of his arms and ended up having 2 less working limbs in the morning. By the way, this game is from a time when instruction booklets were included in the box, which meant there's no in-game tutorial for anything. Which means it took me a full 30 seconds of being sprayed and struggling with menus to figure out how to beat its head in with a 2x4 James wrenched off the wall. So feel free to laugh at me, I certainly did. And after all that, it only took 2 whacks to put it down. Bit anticlimactic, really. It's also now that more of these things start roaming around the town proper, which you can easily just run past most of them and not bother with the process of mulching them. And I highly recommend this because the plank is a terrible weapon that takes forever to properly kill anything with. And you will want to properly kill things because if you don't, then this happens. The noise I made when that thing started slither scrambling across the ground cannot be replicated, nor can I afford to replace the chair I shat a hole through, so thanks for that, Silent Hill. Anyway, after running around the town for a while, I eventually made my way to the apartment, the game's first proper dungeon, I guess? I'm not sure what you call an individual area in this game. And I'll spare you all the back and forthing it took to eventually puzzle my way to making progress, but I will say it involves finding a flashlight, which also includes finding a new enemy. This is the mannequin, which clearly represents how much it fucking hurts to be kicked in the face. Anyway, I 2x4'd it to death and now I can actually see what I'm doing, which makes exploration actually feasible, and eventually led me to meeting the next important NPC.
Ow! Hey, wait! Damn it.
Okay, meat might have been a strong word. What the fuck is an 8-year-old doing in Silent Hill anyway? Besides fucking with James, I mean. Oh yeah, I also found a handgun in a shopping cart in someone's apartment, the widely known natural habitat of both firearms and grocery vehicles. And then I heard this. Well, obviously someone has to help whoever that was, so I bravely rush off to investigate. Nope. Also, I found the guy who screamed. He's dead now, which James seems to be in disbelief of, despite seeing far weirder things all damn day. But conveniently, he also had the key I was looking for that I neglected to mention earlier, which means I just need to stick my hand in a moth hole, reset the clock for daylight savings time, and then we can continue on with this game what we're playing. I wonder what will happen next. Might we chance upon a fated encounter with that swarthy man about town himself, the dashing and sexy Pyramid Head? Turns out yes, and James is so flustered at the thought of meeting a local celebrity that he hides in a nearby closet and waits for him to go away. Aw, what a cutie. Anyway, I eventually come out of the closet and run into another person. Wow, meeting 3 people in one day. James has been making great strides in overcoming his social anxiety. This is Eddie, who...
It wasn't me. I didn't do it.
Who clearly needs some space, so I'll come back later. Eat some saltines, my dude. They help settle the stomach. Anyway, I'll show myself out. Speaking of eating, I also found some juice back on the first floor, which is great because I've had nothing but health drinks all day and I could really use a... hang on, cranberry. This is an evil, evil town. Nothing of real note happens for a while except for this. And then, well, this happens.
Oh, it's you. I'm so tired.
So, why did you come to this town anyway?
I'm sorry. Did you find the person you're looking for? If I kept it. I'm not sure what I might do. No! Oh, I'm sorry. I've been bad. Please don't.
I'm going to have a lot to say about both James and Angela later, so we're going to put a pin in this for now because it's time for what is technically the game's first boss fight. I'm obviously using the term loosely here. It's okay, I said beforehand. What's funny is that this is a stalling fight where you're just waiting for Geometry Face here, who clearly represents James's suppressed homosexual desires, to get bored and wander off. But I was sitting in the corner waiting and completely missed the part where he apparently just walks down into the flooded stairwell, which I actually regret. I think that would have been a riot to see. He also apparently pulls the plug on his way out because the water drains and I finally get to leave the apartment and step out into the only slightly less damp fresh air of the town again. And the moment I do, James is immediately bullied by a child again.
What's a little girl like you doing here anyway?
Huh? Are you blind or something?
What's that letter?
None of your business. You didn't love Mary anyway.
Wait!
I fucking love Laura. Her entire role in the game is to show up, bully the pathetic excuse for a grown-ass man in front of her, and then run off giggling. Absolute legend. Having been thoroughly destroyed by a literal child, James has no recourse except to continue on to Rosewater Park in the hopes that he can find...
Mary? No, you're not.
Do I look like your girlfriend?
No, my late wife. I can't believe it. You could be her twin. Your face, your voice, just your hair and clothes are different.
My name is Maria.
Yeah, say hi to Maria, everyone. She'll be our escortee for the evening, as well as our source of incredibly uncomfortable banter. You have to defend her from monsters as well, which is pretty easy because they usually only attack you one at a time. And because I have no idea where I'm actually going right now, she spends a lot of time watching me beat fallen bodies in a paranoid frenzy, especially once the mannequins literally start throwing themselves at you, which I feel is meant to signify that shit's about to get fucky, but I spend so much time running down the fucking road and then running back because I went the wrong fucking way for 10 minutes that I honestly can't tell anymore. I eventually figure out that I'm supposed to head to the bowling alley where I walk in on Laura bullying Eddie like the adorable little full-time bastard that she is, as he pours his heart out over a pizza before she runs off and Eddie throws a tantrum and refuses to help look for her. Gonna be honest, dick move Eddie. Well, seeing as someone has to be the responsible adult and James is, unfortunately, the closest thing to that around here, we take it upon ourselves to go after her, and Maria just so happens to know where she went, leading us through a strip club and eventually to the hospital. A hospital full of lore that I don't actually care about, so I won't be talking about it. The hospital also introduces us to our new enemy, the Bubblehead Nurses, which symbolize the exploitation of the American healthcare system as they chase you down and beat your money out of you with lead pipes for daring to not be totally healthy all the time. Anyway, after running around and piping a whole bunch of nurses before they can pipe me, Maria eventually starts coughing and getting tired, which isn't foreshadowing for anything, I promise. So I have her lie down to rest for a while so I can do whatever it is that men do when women aren't around and make my way to the roof. A roof with nothing but the single most depressing diary in the world and a door that locks behind me, leaving me trapped. Okay, now how do I... Guess that works. Thanks, dude. Okay, now where is that kid I totally didn't forget I was supposed to be looking for? Ah, found her. And she wants to show me something. Isn't that nice? Okay, not that nice. Also, you?
You snotty little brat! Open up!
Why, you...
Nice going, James. Now we're trapped in here with these things. Flesh lips, I believe they're called, which clearly represent how annoying it is to fight multiple enemies in a small room. I don't know. They're technically not a hard boss fight, just really fucking disturbing and stressful, and once again, the tank controls are the bigger danger to me than the actual monsters, and they keep grabbing me with their weird feet and I don't like them! Anyway, I eventually solved the problem the American way, and then... and now we're here. This is the Nightmare Hospital. You can tell because it's grosser than before. And also because I picked up a first aid kit and then a bunch of nurses beat me to death because I didn't want to pay $5,000 for a band-aid and some ibuprofen. It's okay, I got them back. Also, jump scare.
James!
Mary? Oh, Maria. It's you. I thought you were... Sorry. Anyway, I'm glad you're alive.
Anyway!
You know, the longer I play this game, the less and less I like this man. As a person, I mean, he's rather fascinating as a character, and I'll have a lot to say on him later, but for now, let's just say my sympathies lie with Maria for the most part. And despite it meaning that the escort quest has returned, I actually appreciate having Maria around again. The company makes the hospital feel less daunting, and having her around means I can utilize the strength of 2 adults instead of just 1, as well as having someone to turn to and share a what the fuck when this randomly happens.
Hi there, everybody! Thanks for tuning in. Welcome to another exciting edition of Trick or Treat. Here you either answer the questions correctly and win a great prize, or fail to answer correctly and receive the punishment. It all depends on you. And our lucky, or should I say unlucky challenger today is James. James Sunderland!
What was that?
Seriously, what the fuck? I actually quite like Maria. Just not enough to stay behind when Pyramid Daddy starts chasing us, leading to...
Open up!
Oh no, Maria's dead. We're never seeing her again. Oh well, no time to unpack that now. Back to looking for my dead wife. So we put the trauma of the elevator behind us and run off to find that the town isn't foggy anymore, it's just really fucking dark, and now full of nurses for some reason. Either the shift change just happened, or they're all here to beat my hospital bill out of me. But since nothing in this game can move faster than a brisk stumble, I can just run past the shrieking banshees, collect the wrench I need, and then proceed to get fucking lost in the maze that is Rosewater Park for 10 minutes while I look for where some tranked up dipshit hid the key to the fucking museum. Oh happy day! I did eventually find it, but not before setting a new daily steps record on James's Fitbit. Hey, at least the cardio is good for you, Sunday boy. Anyway, after making my way back down the longest road in the world, I fucking swear, I finally entered the Silent Hill Historical Society, which is filled with a whole bunch of ominous paintings and the distant sound of a fucking foghorn for some reason. And also the single longest fucking staircase down I've ever seen in my fucking life, which leads to what I presume is the big highlight of the museum tour, the horrifyingly dingy iron room containing a hole, which James just jumps down into. As you do. Somehow the square makes a circle, which I eventually smash my way out of, because while there are very few problems in this game that can be solved with the strategic application of a heavy object, happily, this is one of them. And after being cock-blocked by some more locked doors, I finally locate the keys I need to proceed. Yay! But then my flashlight dies. Boo! But luckily I just happened to pick up the spare battery in the hospital. Yay! But then... Whew. Almost lost my cool there. No, where the hell am I? What the fuck?
Killing a person ain't no big deal.
What the fuck?
Just put the gun to their head. Pow.
What the fuck?
I was just joking, James. He was dead when I got here. Honest. Anyway, I gotta run.
Dude, what the actual fuck? Okay, so after whatever the fuck all of that was, I leave the cafeteria and find that we're actually in a prison of some kind. What it's doing all the way down here is a fucking mystery, but I've long since accepted that reality is broken, so whatever, I guess. Gonna be honest, this place is fucking awful. It's dark and disturbing, and no matter where you go, there's a horrifying and oppressive sense of wrongness. Ominous sounds attached to nothing at all play in every other room, and it feels like the entire construct is conspiring to drive you to madness. It's the scariest section in the game, which makes it the actual best. No, I am not joking. This is made even better by the fact that James keeps jumping into holes that cannot possibly exist and that there's literally no way he should be able to survive, which on a thematic level is so fucking fitting I can't help but love it. People tell me Pathologic is good, but that game only has one hole you can throw yourself into and this game has like 8, so it's clearly better. The prison is also, ironically, the biggest reprieve in the game because nothing plot relevant happens and you can just soak in the horror atmosphere and probably some asbestos too. Dropping into the labyrinth, however, nets you 4 different plot developments, and 2 of those are boss fights. Plot development the first. Maria's back to life somehow, and exceptionally creepy.
Aren't you Maria?
I'm not your Mary.
So, you're Maria?
I am. If you want me to be.
Geez, lady, pick a personality and stick with it. Plot point 2, the single most horrifying thing in the entire game, where you cross over into Angela's nightmare of a room and kill the representation of her abusive rapist father. I can't even try to be funny about this. This is heartbreaking and horrifying, and I'll be coming back to it later. Third plot development. Maria dies off screen of insert disease here, and James cares for a full 10 seconds. You're just attempting the grief speedrunning record at this point, aren't you? Final plot point. After jumping into his own grave, James finds Eddie again, who has clearly lost what precious little of his mind he had left.
But you know what? It doesn't matter if you're smart, dumb, ugly, pretty. It's all the same once you're dead. And a corpse can't laugh.
Okay, he's obviously unstable and dangerous, so the best thing to do is not provoke.
Eddie, have you gone nuts?
James, you brain-dead bastard, why are you like this?
Whatever, I didn't like this guy anyway. And unfortunately for him, I brought a rifle and a stockpile of medkits, and I also own the only functioning brain in the room since despite having a gun, Eddie keeps trying to run up and punch me for some reason. I've heard Eddie's fight is really annoying and I can see how that might be the case, but my experience was laughably easy, which I'll honestly chalk up to mostly being luck. I'm sure if I replayed the fight, RNGesus wouldn't be so kind, since he's kind of a dick like that. Anyway, James is shocked and appalled to learn that shooting someone can kill them, and has a brief breakdown about being a murderer before getting over it and moving on. This man can instantly get over everything but his marriage, I fucking swear. Anyway, having spent the last 2 hours delving so far under the ground that traversal officially qualifies as spelunking, we step out of the freezer and onto the docks by the lake. Yep, that checks out. One not short enough boat ride later, we finally arrive at the Lakeview Hotel, which is apparently the actual special place Mary was referring to in her letter. It also has a lovely little restaurant where they serve fish keys and piano jump scares. Hi Laura, good to see you again. Laura gives us a letter that Mary sent her that reveals they were actually very close and drops the twist that Mary literally couldn't have died 3 years ago because Laura only just turned 8 and the letter wished her a happy 8th birthday. I wonder what other twists are hiding in the hotel. Has James been married the whole time? Has this entire thing been an allegory for being trans? Sadly no, but I'm sure that AU lives on in a fanfic somewhere. Laura also had another letter but apparently lost it, so she runs off to see if she can find it somewhere and you step out of the restaurant, kill 2 abstract daddies that somehow wandered in from hell where they belong, and run off to explore the hotel yourself. In the lobby there's a big music box that's part of a progression puzzle, and a letter at the desk informing James that he left his sex tape here the last time they visited, because this was back in the dark ages when all media was physical and bulky, and James isn't about to miss out on collecting the only porn of his dead wife in existence, so finding and watching that becomes our new main goal. The only actual thing of note between you and the tape is a section where you have to dump all of your stuff in a locker, so an elevator meant to carry only one person will actually accept your big fat ass without complaint. And yeah, logically speaking, carrying around the entire contents of a paranoid prepper's bunker would weigh you down a tad, it's just weird that this is the only time it matters. I won't complain too much though, because it was genuinely tense and scary to be without any form of protection for the first time since the start of the game, so I really quite liked it. Anyway, I eventually find the tape and go back to the room James and Mary stayed in, and pop that sucker in the VCR, and witness Mary in all her sepia-toned glory, before that big twist I mentioned earlier fuzzes onto the screen and slams into James like a runaway train. And then Laura runs in to rub even more salt in the wounds as James is forced to explain his sins to a literal child, utterly crushing her in the process. You are just the biggest of bastards, aren't you, Mr. Sunderland? So Laura runs off, and hearing someone call his name through the TV, James finally leaves the room and discovers that reality has begun to fully break down, as the hotel not only looks like it was redecorated by J.K. Rowling, but walls are where they shouldn't be and doorways act as portals. You also finally encounter Angela again, this time entirely stepping into her version of the town and experiencing it from her point of view. And once again, she is the single most heartbreaking character in the whole of the game. Fucking hell, this woman makes me want to cry every time she's on screen. We can't follow her because fire hot ow, so we have no choice but to turn around and leave her to her fate. We have our own to confront after all, and given that there's 9 fucking save points on the wall right before the next important room, I get the feeling the developers are trying to tell me something.
Stop! Leave her alone! Leave us both the hell alone!
Oh, this is just excessive. Whatever, James gets over it in record time, so let's just do the same with the boss fight. They kill themselves because being outdone by James Sunderland of all people is way too fucking embarrassing to live with. And then I'm left to walk down the hallway and listen to an exchange Mary has with James near the very end of her life that's just... God, this hurts to listen to. The last hour of the game is just one emotional kick in the balls after another, and it's honestly brought me to the verge of tears multiple times now. It's fine, we're almost done. So after dealing with that, we run up the stairs and encounter Maria, reborn one last time as Mary's perfect twin. However, James rejects her once again, and infuriated by the fact that she's expected to just disappear after everything she's been put through for this man, she rejects his rejection and transforms into the final boss. I'm on her side here, honestly, but I can't finish the game without ending her suffering, so she just gets to throttle James a couple of times and annoy me with her damn moths before I put her out of my misery. Watch one last exchange between James and Mary where he admits to being a bastard, and then decides to go on a nice scenic drive. Right into the lake. Then the words from Mary's actual final letter to James scroll up the screen, and the credits roll, and that is the end of Silent Hill 2. Alright, so does this game live up to all the hype? No, but that would be entirely impossible. And the actually pertinent question is, does Silent Hill 2 still hold up? And the answer to that is, absolutely it does, it's a fantastic game. I mentioned back at the beginning that it obviously had the game spoiled for me, and that's because nobody who has ever played this game has ever shut the fuck up about it. Silent Hill 2 is one of those games, the kind of game that people placed as a contender for best game ever, and has been hyped to hell and back ever since it came out, and this is true for a lot of the games I'll be getting to in this project. But I didn't go into this game expecting it to live up to 25 years of hype, I went into it expecting it to be good, and I got that. Hype is the enemy of objectivity, and something I always strive to do when reviewing a game, or even just going into a game I've heard a lot about, is to set aside any preconceived notions and engage with it on its own objective merits. And it's because of my ability to do so that I can say, objectively, that this game is really fucking good. What's funny though is that from a purely gameplay perspective, Silent Hill 2 is kind of shit. Even setting aside my struggles with tank controls, combat is slow and clunky, exploration is a bit of a chore, and both puzzles and progression tend to rely on the super weird moon logic that both old horror and adventure games are well known for. One of the things that stood out to me was when you had to find a lighter, a horseshoe, and a wax doll to assemble a new handle for the trapdoor in the prison, all the while carrying around several objects that you could have used to just pry it the fuck open. You can argue it's conventional for the genre all you want, it's still circuitous and illogical. And you can argue combat being kind of shit is an important aspect of the survival horror genre or creative vision or whatever, and I will actually defend that point myself later, though clunkiness is still really annoying, and the game really drags when you have to stand over an enemy and whack them 5 or 6 more times after they stop moving to make sure they actually stay dead. All that said, the control scheme and combat system work well for the feeling the game is trying to evoke, and they don't actually get in the way of functionality. I was streaming Resident Evil 7 this month while I was gathering footage for this game as well, and I came away with a far greater appreciation for Silent Hill's design because of that. Something I find very funny is, despite my trouble with the tank controls, I felt more in control of James than I did of Ethan because James actually moves at a reasonable pace, and the mechanics feel fair. Ethan's movement is a fucking crawl, and even his alleged run barely qualifies as a leisurely trot. And a lot of the game's combat is made infinitely more frustrating by how restrictive Ethan's movement is, leading to many an extremely frustrating death on stream. And frustration very quickly kills horror. But outside of when I got lost in the park, I was almost never frustrated by Silent Hill 2, and I only ever had to repeat the one boss fight. Combat may be somewhat annoying, especially when you're forced to run to the other side of the room for the 13th time, but it at least feels fairly designed. It's still kinda shit, but deliberately and manageably so. It also helps that the game isn't exceptionally long. My playthrough clocked in at about 6.5 hours, and at least 40 minutes of that was spent with the game paused, either because I was looking at the map or because my roommate distracted me and I left the game alone for an extended period of time. I think the game is exactly as long as it needs to be, and there really isn't anything that feels dragged out. Even the best horror loses its effectiveness once you've been exposed to it long enough, and Silent Hill 2 manages its time very well. Also, the voice acting is kind of hilariously bad in this game. I know it was intentional and I actually find it weirdly charming, but it also can have the effect of dulling some of the emotional impact when most of the characters sound like their voice actors took a blow to the head before reading the lines. No, what Silent Hill 2 really gets right, and consistently knocks out of the fucking park, is the atmosphere and storytelling. This game is so fucking good at making you feel alone and scared and in horrible danger, and the sound design is a big part of that. Obviously some of the music like Theme of Laura and Promise are phenomenal in their own right, but it's the ambient sounds that really do it for me. There were so many times in my playthrough that some of the most horrific noises would start up out of nowhere with literally nothing dangerous anywhere nearby and freak me the fuck out because I've been trained to expect scary things to accompany scary music in games. And the devs knew this, which is why they use this trick constantly to keep you tense and in a state of anxious dread even when nothing is technically happening, and god damn it worked every time. I kept expecting something to jump out at me, even though I knew this game's reputation and I knew that wouldn't happen. I knew Silent Hill wouldn't do me dirty with a cheap jump scare, but I still expected it to do something, and it made exploration way scarier than it would have been otherwise. It was great, honestly. I love actually being scared, and this game delivered. Everything about this game just oozes with a sense of dreadful loneliness. James's version of Silent Hill is a barren, foggy void that, despite being a town with an actual history, doesn't feel like a place anyone ever lived. It just feels like an evil place that hates you, not because of what you've done, but because you exist. And even when you encounter other characters, you come away feeling even more alone than before because of the way they remain out of sync with your reality, only aligning for brief moments and usually at the end of their lives. But that makes sense when you consider who James is as a person, which is what finally leads us to the characters themselves. I mentioned earlier that I really don't like James as a person, and setting aside the fact that he murdered his wife, it's because he's the kind of guy you could never be friends with. Not that you couldn't try, it's just that the impossibility stems from James himself. James Sunderland is, at the end of the day, a man who is completely empty. He's someone who refuses to connect to the people around him, partially because he doesn't care to, and also because there's nothing inside of him to foster similarity and therefore to serve as the basis for that connection. You've probably met people like James before. Someone who's pleasant enough, but just rebuffs any attempt you make to get to know them out of a complete lack of interest. James just does not give a shit about anyone but Mary. Everyone else serves as a possible direction giver to start and a complete burden at all points after. James is a horrendously lonely person, but that loneliness is entirely his own fault. He refuses to forge any kind of meaningful connection or relationship to anyone. He's not impolite or anything, but he makes it pretty clear in how he acts that he just doesn't care about the people he encounters outside of what they can do for him, no matter how much it might end up hurting them. Even when people do try to connect to him, he completely stonewalls them and fucks off to look for a woman he knows is dead. You can see this as early as his first encounter with Angela. He doesn't bother to ask her name, he cuts her off when she tries to warn him, and he just gives her this vacant, uncaring stare as she talks about what she's looking for in the town. It's not until their second meeting that he even bothers to introduce himself or ask for her name. You can see this in how he interacts with Eddie as well. He at least introduces himself, but the moment Eddie can't be of any use to him, he leaves the guy behind in a monster-infested building. He just tells the man clutching the toilet to be careful and then fucks off. This behavior is the most pronounced when it comes to Maria, and I think that's because she's the only one who calls him out on it. She's the only one to get angry at him for getting ready to walk away and leave her in the monster-infested fog. And while you can debate on how much danger she'd actually be in, it's still an undeniably shitty thing for him to try to do. James strikes me as the kind of guy who's very invested in his self-image as a good person, but not so much in putting in the work required to actually be a good person, which is why he immediately relents when Maria calls him out. He's generally pleasant to people and he does the bare minimum that might be expected in a normal circumstance, like taking Angela's knife away, but these are not normal circumstances, and he refuses to go any further than that because, well, like I said, none of these people are Mary, so he doesn't actually give a shit about them. And I think that attitude actively harms the people around him. There are a lot of examples I could point to throughout the game, but I think Angela serves as the best of all. Angela is a rape survivor, and from the moment she's introduced, she's giving off so many red flags, she's practically communicating in semaphore. She's a scared young woman standing alone in a graveyard, desperately trying to warn James about the danger of a town she's made clear she needs to explore herself. And the next time he sees her, she's staring into a knife and idly contemplating suicide. Everything about this girl is screaming that she shouldn't be left alone and desperately needs help, but James blows her off as soon as he can because he has to go look for his dead wife. Angela's story is so horrifically tragic. She was raped by her father and probably her brother, and then blamed by her mother for being a victim of one of the most horrible crimes any human can commit on another person. She was horribly abused by the people that she should have been able to trust more than anyone else, and her otherworld takes full advantage of that to hurt her more than any other character with the possible exception of Maria. I think Angela is actually proof that the town is a fully malevolent force that actively delights in the torment of the people who find their way inside. It reminds me of Hill House, how it chews people up and spits them back out without any regard to moral status or innocence. I've heard interpretations that the town is passing judgment on people's crimes or even that it's a form of extreme therapy, but I really don't think either is the case. I think the town simply confronts the darkness inside of people with the purpose of breaking them, because I can't think of any other way to explain the logic of how it acts. Eddie crippled his worst bully and killed the man's dog, and so the town confronts him with a replica of his tormentor and continually pushes him until he snaps and embraces violence as a universal solution, which ends in his own violent death. And Angela's only guilty of being a victim and killing her rapist in self-defense, which isn't a crime worthy of punishment. But the town not only confronts her with the abstract daddy, which represents both her abuser and the act of her abuse, but it also reminded her that the only other family she had blamed her for her own mistreatment. The town drove a rape survivor to suicide with some of the most malicious psychological torture I think I've ever seen in a game, and she deserved none of it. The world just watched her slowly die from her abuse, and then James watched her slowly die to the town. This is a hill I will die on, by the way. James likely could have saved her if he actually cared. Someone who gave a shit wouldn't have left her alone, wouldn't have let her just walk away like that. I know some people are going to say she pushed him away, which is true, but there were 2 interactions before she got to that point where she could have been helped. And even at the end there, when she's mocking him and asking if he'll heal all her pain, almost anything he could have said would have been better than just staying silent. Fuck, all he would have had to do is extend his hand and say something to the effect of, "I can't, but if you come with, I know someone will." Anything to give her the briefest glimpse of hope. The town's nature being this way also explains why Laura is so undaunted by everything, because she doesn't have darkness to prey upon. To her, Silent Hill has no monsters or hauntings, it's just a shitty, run-down holiday destination. And then there's Maria, the single most doomed by the narrative woman I've ever seen in my fucking life. Maria was a living person hewn from nothingness and cast into the fog of Silent Hill with one purpose: to be killed to hurt James. Just like the rest of the cast, Maria is incredibly lonely. In fact, that loneliness is her primary motivation. She wants to be around James and stay with him, not just because she was created for that purpose, but because he's the only one who can actually see her. She only exists for him, a replica of his wife dressed to excite his frustrated libido and with a personality to match, but doomed to never be able to connect with him because despite appearances, she just isn't Mary. And she's forced to come to terms with the fact that James doesn't care about her at all. He views her as a burden, an extra obstacle in the way of his reunion with his wife. And the worst part is how much she suffers for him. The town kills her 3 different times in increasingly horrible ways before he rejects her on that rooftop one final time, expecting her to disappear just like Pyramid Head because he doesn't need her anymore. She isn't the final boss because she was always a monster planning his destruction. She's the final boss because her entire existence is one of pain and loneliness, and it's his fault. This is why I set him on her side in the end. Because her lot in life is so cruel and unfair, and it's all because she had the misfortune of being tethered to James Sunderland. She's a footnote in her own existence because she was literally created just to be repeatedly killed just to hurt James, which is such a cruel display of apathetic malice on the part of the town itself, let alone in the way James treats her. Despite everything I've had to say about him so far, and I do still have more, I do genuinely find James to be a fascinating character, because it's very rare that you see a creation so defined by lack. Mary was the only person James ever seemed to care about to any degree. She was his everything. As far as we can tell, he doesn't have any other friends or family outside of her, which means she was literally all he had in his life, which is just a horrifically unhealthy relationship to have, though not an entirely uncommon one. I think I've talked in another video about how unhealthy the expectations surrounding modern romantic relationships are, and James is the perfect embodiment of that. Your partner is expected to be your everything, your best friend, your sole emotional confidant, your lover, your whatever you need, to the point that the pressure it places on people absolutely destroys them, especially if that relationship is lost and a person is suddenly left with their entire support system completely obliterated. While it's true that it tends to be harder to form strong friendships as an adult, and it's absolutely a fact that the way men are socialized sabotages their ability to form healthy, emotionally supportive relationships with both women and other men, it's very rare that you'll ever see it quite to the same extent as James. The man's only connection to humanity is his wife. She's the only one he's ever bothered to foster any form of relationship to. He has nothing going on outside of his marriage and the job he has to financially sustain that marriage. It's kind of tragic. I realise this is going to be a very unpopular opinion, but I'm honestly not entirely convinced that James loved Mary for herself and not the role she played. Her illness lasted 3 years and saw the deterioration of their relationship in that time, but the way he ended up despising her is truly unreal. I recognise that some resentment for how she ended up lashing out at him is natural, but the way she talks to him in that flashback in the hallway really paints a picture of just how horrible it was for her to watch him just pull away from her as she suffered.
What do you want, James?
I brought you some flowers.
Flowers? I don't want any damn flowers. Just go home already.
Mary, what are you saying?
Look, I'm disgusting. I don't deserve flowers. Between the disease and the drugs, I look like a monster. Well, what are you looking at? Get the hell out of here! Leave me alone already! I'm no use to anyone. I'll be dead soon anyway. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow. It'd be easier if they'd just kill me. But I guess the hospital is making a nice profit off me. They want to keep me alive. Are you still here? I told you to go. Are you deaf? Don't come back. James, wait. Please don't go. Stay with me. Don't leave me alone. I didn't mean what I said. Please, James. Tell me I'll be okay. Tell me I'm not going to die. Help me.
I cannot fucking comprehend how much hatred it would take to decide to murder someone who was already on the verge of death and just wanted to spend her final days with the man she loved. That's not something done out of simple resentment, that is an active and hateful malice rarely ever seen. No wonder he suffered a complete mental breakdown and hallucinated his way to Silent Hill. He murdered the only person he cared about, and in doing so, severed his only ties to humanity. I think this is why the town created Maria in the first place, not because losing her would hurt him, but because losing what she represents would. Despite treating Maria like a burden, he does protect her. It's entirely feasible to make sure she goes completely unscathed, allowing James to play the role of the provider and protector that he never really could for Mary. The town allows him to protect the representation of his wife from everything. Everything that is except himself. And the disease.
Maria, no! What happened to you?
Pyramid Head represents everything ugly and violent about James that he doesn't want to acknowledge, and his role is to force James to acknowledge everything. The violence James inflicted on Mary is directly reflected in how Isosceles' skull batters the mannequins and brutally kills Maria, but it's also reflected in combat. It's no mistake that most of the enemies are feminine in design, nor how frail they are. They can absolutely wreck you, sure, but it's also super easy to stun lock them and then lay a prolonged beating on their fallen form. A downed enemy is almost entirely helpless once you start laying into them, serving as a repeated reflection on how Mary was far too weak to defend herself from James when he decided to kill her. I know there are other endings, but setting aside the fact that the in-water ending is basically canon, I honestly think it's the only one that makes sense. I know some people prefer the Leave ending because it's implied James adopts Laura, but there is no way in hell that would end well or even be a healthy relationship. If you actually tried to argue James would make anything even remotely close to a good father, I would laugh on your face. No, the in-water ending makes sense because, empty as he is, James just has nothing left. He came to the town to kill himself and that's what he ends up doing. I know I made a big deal about James essentially dooming Eddie and Angela through his apathy, but as much as I wish there could have been a better ending for them, we simply couldn't have Silent Hill 2 if James was the kind of person who would do that. Silent Hill 2 is a tragedy, and a tragedy is always the result of the very natures of the characters involved. If things had been different, if people had made different, better choices, then things would have been different. But then we wouldn't have had this story at all. But just because it could have been different doesn't mean this story wasn't worth telling. And Silent Hill 2 was absolutely a story worth telling, and a story worth experiencing. Despite the pain and the horror and the sorrow, it remains beautiful in its tragedy, and I'm glad I finally played it. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'd like to give a huge thanks to my patrons for their support, especially Wisteria, Tetraphobe49, Lustrous Lizard, and Owen Oofs. I really am glad I played this game. I ended up enjoying it far more than I thought I would. I also ended up with a lot more to say about it than I expected I would, but I had to cut some of that for time since I was really fucking late in getting this video done, and it's already a lot longer than I intended. I will be making more videos on the rest of the series, but when I get around to that will be up to my Patreon supporters. If you like my content and would like a hand in deciding what game I finally play next, consider supporting me on Patreon, where starting at $1 a month you can get access to my private Discord and special polls and posts. Anyway, I need to go rest my voice and prepare for the next video, so I must bid you farewell and hope you have a lovely day. Bye.